do that if you want to chime in. I'm going to give you a little bit of housekeeping items and then we'll get started. My name is Jen Wesson. I'm the Executive Director of the Head of the Schuylkill Regatta. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Committee 50, we welcome you to our first story hour of 2023. So a little bit of background on the genesis of the story hour. Many of you have been with us in the past. We started this during the pandemic in late 2020. And it was just such a great outpouring of support and community that we kept it going. And this committee of 7 has gone strong throughout the years, putting together writing pieces on our website about events and folks and crews and coaches that have had their effect on rowing. The Head of the Schuylkill, Philadelphia, but in general, the rowing community is a small one and connected in many ways. So these stories really do cover the girth of the country and the world. So we're happy to have people from around the world with us this evening. So this year we've decided to really kind of get back to our roots and why we wanted to do something like this. And it really was to kind of capture the stories of our history. And we've talked many times in the past as a committee about how are we going to really preserve this into the future? Who are going to be those people that carry the torch after some of our guests this evening? There's no real plan around it, and there's no real organization of how we go about doing it within our clubs, within our communities, and within our sport. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges to doing that, and some of the successes folks have had, and then kind of where do we go from here? So I'm going to let Rick kind of elaborate that a little bit more, but very quickly, just a few housekeeping items. Again, I muted everybody. If you can remain on mute just to eliminate any background noise, that would be so helpful so we can hear everybody's awesome comments this evening. If you put yourself on your Zoom on gallery view, you'll be able to see everybody. And it kind of just is really why we do it on Zoom, so we can see one another, so our guests can see us and we can see them and we can give them feedback, and really just smiles and really share kind of space with folks. If you do have anything that you want to contribute while someone's talking, you can put it in the chat room, even if it's a question, and I'll make sure that it gets answered as I monitor that throughout the evening. At the end, after everyone kind of gives their talk, we will open it up to questions. So we'll have about 15 minutes at the end where folks can chime in, add to stories, add to items that folks talked about tonight, as well as ask questions. So with that, we will probably go till 8:15, just so everybody is aware. And then the last thing is that this is being recorded. So if anybody that was not able to join tonight, we will send out the link tomorrow morning and it'll be posted on our YouTube page. And we hope you look at some of our story hours from the past. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Rick Stellick. Rick has been a member of Malta Boat Club in Philadelphia since 1966. He has competed for them as an elite and at the master's level. He served as their coach for 15 years and also as their president. And after 45 years as a construction manager, he continues to actively support the operations and maintenance of Malta. And more recently, has been involved in the preservation of the historic archives for Malta and for all Boathouse Row, really getting everybody organized along the row. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick. Thank you all for being here. Rick, you're just on mute, so just make sure you unmute yourself there.
Okay, there I am. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm gratified. We're all gratified and overwhelmed by the response, which I think demonstrates how important this is. As Jen's pointed out, this is something we really want to address, and I think we've got a great group of people who have been working on this over the years and have a perspective on it and made contributions throughout the country. And one of the main goals here is to make everybody on this call aware of these efforts which are going on, and to help get some ideas on how we can continue this. Very quickly, my involvement, particularly in the archiving world, got started out with Malta Boat Club because we had these cabinets full of stuff. But we also did a quick search of some of the sites in Philadelphia, and one of them was the Pennsylvania Historic Society. And much to our surprise, we found that they had 10 boxes of records from Malta Boat Club from 1890 to 1920, which we didn't know they had. And that was just a shock to us. And we found out later they were given to the Pennsylvania Historic Society by somebody who wasn't even a Malta member. And me and Chuck Patterson, who's on the call tonight, went down there and looked at these things. We were just overwhelmed by the history of our club, many aspects of it we didn't know. So that really got our appetites going and helped us to continue to preserve our records at Malta. And as we did that, we all realized that this is a much broader issue throughout the country, throughout the history of rowing. And I've now learned to met with some wonderful people that are on this call tonight who have been working on this very hard to maintain it in their own ways. And I think the goal tonight is to let everybody else know what some of these are and then get some suggestions on how we might be able to make this happen in the future. So Jen, why don't you hit the first slide there if you can. We're gonna have just a quick few slides before we get going. So this is a title page and just in need of saving, displaying historical artifacts of rowing. And then the first slide is from Bachelor's Barge Club, which is very indicative of the condition of a lot of records. And that's not a criticism, it's a challenge. And these are a book of their minutes, which we also at Malta have numerous copies of, which are now down at the Pennsylvania Historic Society. But these go back many, many years. And anybody who's read these, which I have read all 4,000 pages of Malta's, realizes that it's a history of Boathouse Row and a history of U.S. rowing. And some are in reasonable shape, some are in deplorable condition. But it's illustrative of the issue that we were trying to address. Want to go to the next one, Jen? This is something I found hidden away in our artifacts. This is from 1863. And this is the treasurer's book for 1863 of Malta Barge Club, which I didn't even know at the time that Malta Boat Club used to be called Malta Barge Club. And our secretary treasurer, Mr. Illman, in 1863, this was his book of our expenses for that year. And this is, and we have it safely put away, but it's in need of preservation. Okay, Jen, next one. This is Mr. Stotesbury. Mr. Stotesbury, I'm sure you all would now associate with the Stotesbury Regatta, but his portrait, once again, is a hidden treasure of Boathouse Row, which is hanging at the button up there for Bachelor's Barge, and not many people know it exists there, but it's one of those treasures and makes the connection between Mr. Stotesbury and what he really looked like, very distinguished looking gentleman. And eventually, of course, it became associated with the Stotesbury Regatta, which has been a fixture on Boathouse Row for eons. This is a interesting artifact, which was a 1830s painting, which came on the market a few years ago of Philadelphia and Boathouse Row as it was back in 1830. It's somewhat stylized, but Undine Barge managed to procure the rights to that, and it's had it reproduced and sold as a fundraiser. But you'll notice, to those familiar with Philadelphia, this, you see Lemon Hill up there in the upper right-hand corner. You kind of see the initials representations of the boathouses. And this was advertised as one of the first races in Philadelphia, probably shortly after the spillway or dam was built in 1830 and created the upriver pool, which made rowing in Philadelphia possible as a sport. I don't know if they all had these eights looking exactly like that, but they were racing back in the 1830s and moving forward. This is out of this is a rather interesting gentleman. I think many of you have heard about him, Ed Hanlon. Bill Miller had this in his collection, which Dotty put in her book. And Bill can maybe comment on it, but this is indicative of some of these gentlemen back then who were the professional rowers. Even a little picture of his racing shell, which was quite different. We've come to understand from the racing shells of today, and that it was much longer and much thinner. But this is another artifact that is important to try and save, and is in Bill's collection, but it's certainly something everybody could benefit from seeing. Okay, Jen. This is a stereoscopic view of Boathouse Row, probably around 1860 to 1865. If you look carefully, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, which is now PGRC, which was a skating club at that time. Undine wasn't even built yet then, nor was Penn AC. Malta was there, University. But what I found interesting, and I think I'm reading this photo correctly, was there was a dredge in the middle of the river, which is we've learned over the last 3 years, dredging has been a ever 15 or 20-year process on Boathouse Row. And this really illustrates what it looked like back then. Of course, the waterworks, which at that time was world famous, which supplied the water for Philadelphia, and up to where the art museum now locates, is there. And this is now, it was a tourist attraction then and has been fully restored. Okay. This is an interesting photo because it kind of gets to the heart of somewhat of our problem. Many of us, clubs, organizations, whatever, we have all these wonderful, wonderful artifacts, and they're fantastic. I mean, the trophies are various levels of sophistication and value, but it gets to the kind of the central issue of what is enough, and how do you make those decisions, and how do you preserve them? I mean, to preserve all these trophies in a display manner is very difficult. Now, I think anybody who is familiar with museums around the world, like for the Philadelphia Art Museum, for instance, they at one time, any one time in their history, maybe only 10% of their artifacts or paintings are on display. The other 90% I read are in storage. But they have that documented, so they know what they have in storage. And that's kind of one of the things we have to think about, even though we can't necessarily display all these wonderful things. How can we preserve them and then make the community aware that they have been preserved and they are accessible? And that's a challenge. But you can see on the upper part of this, you can see one of these wonderful silk and gold threaded banners they used to give around the turn of the century, which are fantastic and have been preserved in several of the clubs. This is finally, this is a rather interesting thing. We just came up the last couple of days. I was over at one of the clubs in Philadelphia, and they have rediscovered a whole series of these silk banners, some of which are in really deplorable condition, some are in pretty good condition. But this one is from 1901, and it is reasonably intact, but extremely fragile. And in order to save these, it's a considerable expense, but it's something either you try and restore them, or you photograph them and save them as best you can and put them in the proper storage environment, which I know Chris Doyle, who's on this call, has been doing and has resources to that. So that's just a real, oh, I'm sorry, one more. While in Malta, I found all sorts of press clippings. It's someone from one of our members was a pack rat, if you will, and say press clippings going back to the 1920s. And I think everybody will recognize these three gentlemen: Walter Hoover, who was a championship single and Henley winner, but the two guys in the center, Costello and Kelly, world famous oarsmen at those times, and of course Jack Kelly, or John Kelly, became a fixture on Boathouse Row and the whole story, and Kelly Drive, and it's one of our major aspects of Boathouse Row. And there's a a whole series of photographs of these gentlemen, along with press clippings go to the 1920s and the 1930s, which we have, but you can tell from this condition that they are in very fragile condition. So how do you save those, or do you just photograph them and make sure people know where these can be accessed? I mean, these were actually photographs, I believe, taken from the Philadelphia Inquirer back then, which is a old time newspaper in Philadelphia. So that's kind of a quick overview. And what we're going to do starting right now is I'm going to bring on Dotty Brown, who has written, as everybody knows, this wonderful book several years ago about Boathouse Row, and entitled the exact title here, Boathouse Row, Waves of Change in the Birthplace of America Rowing. And we all here in Philadelphia have given her a great deal of credit and appreciation for doing that, which really got things kind of people talking again about Boathouse Row. So I'm going to turn it over to Dotty, and if she will talk about the genesis of her book and what she learned from it, I would think that would be a great start to this evening. So Dotty, if you're ready to go,
Yep.
please.
Hey, Rick, thank you so much. That was a very nice intro. So what is so interesting about the history of rowing and Boathouse Row, and why should we care about all this old stuff and try to preserve it? When Temple University Press came to me and asked me if I wanted to write a history of Boathouse Row, frankly, I couldn't imagine that I'd be interested in it. I certainly didn't want to spend what I knew would take several years writing about one champion rower after another, and I didn't think the broader public would be particularly interested, even though many of them have fascinating stories to tell. But I decided that no other publisher would ever come to me and ask me to write a book. So I went to the archives, as Rick has mentioned. There are fortunately some old minute books and other things in the archives here in Philadelphia. And I immediately was swept away by what I found. So in 1853, the Bachelor's Barge Club wrote its constitution. That's when it started out. And that book is at the Pennsylvania Historical Society. And in the Constitution, it says that you had to be a bachelor to join, a fact that I think very few members of the club today realize. But what really cracked me up was when I read that if you got married, you lost your voting rights. So the minute books took me into a long lost era that I had no clue about. They talk about costumes all the time. It was a really big deal. For instance, the summer uniform, there was also a winter uniform and a dress uniform, but the summer uniform of the Bachelor's Barge Club was a blue flannel shirt with white braid, white duck pants, a Senate hat with a ribbon, and the letters BBC in gilt on the hat. They spent a lot of money on cigars and whiskey. And if you didn't pay your dues, they put your name on the door in the hope that they'd embarrass you into actually paying what you owe. Men were suspended or sometimes thrown out of the clubs because they brought women in. And it was really a different world. But even though those details are very interesting in their own right, what the stories reveal to me, which I think is more important overall, are the social changes that this country went through, as told through the lens of Boathouse Row. In the mid 1800s, you had wealthy young men who could afford costumes and had leisure time to go rowing. They were on the river. In the late part of the century, you had immigrants pouring in, and it was their hard work, determination, the guts that they had, which led a number of the clubs on Boathouse Row to begin winning world championships, Olympic victories. And they had names like Kelly and Costello. They were children of immigrants. Women could vote before they got a chance to row. And that their battle to get on the river mirrors what happened with women in almost every endeavor that they attempted to get into in this country. And today, the rowing community is really working hard to become more inclusive, as we are as a nation. So that's the reason the subtitle of the book is Waves of Change in the Birthplace of American Rowing. And I think that understanding our history is critical to understanding who we are, where we came from, and the artifacts of Boathouse Row and the stories tell that story. So I will pass this back to Rick, because I know many on this call have more to tell.
All right, thanks, Dotty. It's interesting you mentioned it. My good friend Fred Dooling often referred to looking at the archives as Malta Boat Club was a cigar club with a rowing problem. And because that's, it was just as much as a social drinking, cigar smoking club as anything else.
I just want to add one thing
Sure.
for everybody to know that in terms of the newspaper you showed that was shredding, all the old newspapers from the Bulletin and the Inquirer are and all their old photographs are at the Temple University Special Research Library, and they are accessible. So anyone doing research can find them, and they are preserved.
That's great. And that's the kind of thing we really need to talk about tonight. The next person I'm going to bring on, and it's kind of a switch here in terms of scope, but is going to be Goran Buckhorn. And this Goran is a Swedish gentleman from Sweden. He immigrated to the United States, first to England, and where he met his wife, but he learned how to row in Sweden. When he came to the United States, he settled in Connecticut and became involved with the Mystic Seaport, which is, I think many people know, eventually established the Mystic Seaport rowing museum, if you will, as part of their overall campus. But it was under the direction, and Bill Miller will talk about this later, with NRF support and of the assets. But what Goran has done, he created a website called Hear the Boat Sing. And if anybody has visited or not visited, I urge you strongly to do so, and learn so much about rowing around the world. And in speaking with him yesterday or day before, I was shocked in the way he told me that over the years they have published over 4,300 articles about rowing from various people, and people become regular contributors like myself, for instance, but also Tim Koch and various others. So I've asked Goran to talk about his experience in establishing this website and its goals, and to make it help bring its awareness to the forefront. But it is a great vehicle for preserving the history of rowing, not necessarily in Philadelphia, but throughout the world. So Goran, I hope you are ready to go.
I am.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you. So as Rick said, my name is Goran Buckhorn. I'm from Sweden. I rowed in Sweden for several years. I studied at university, became a book editor at a small publishing company. And I took a break from that work to study at University of Wales, which of course is, as everything in Wales, is in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, there I met this very nice American lady, and she is now the reason that I moved over to the United States in August 2000. When I arrived, my wife, the second day I was here, my wife took me down to the local rowing club so I could sign up. And isn't that an understanding wife, I might say. Anyway, after a couple of years, the club, which is in Noank, which is just very close to Mystic, asked me if I wanted to be the boating coordinator, meaning the one that organized all the activities at the club. And of course, I said yes. That was something that I've been doing in Sweden for many years, so I felt comfortable doing that. Well, after a couple of years, there was a reorganization in the club, and they didn't need a coordinator anymore. So I sort of left the club, and while I was working at the museum, in the evenings, I didn't do much. My dear wife told me that I need to do something because I became very grumpy. So she suggested that I should start a blog or a website. I had written some articles for some American magazines and British magazines, and also Swedish, of course, magazines about rowing. And she suggested that I should write articles on rowing. So that was something I felt comfortable doing. So I started doing that. My wife, who was a web manager at Mystic Seaport, she helped me to set up this website or blog, which I called Hear the Boat Sing. I thought that was an appropriate name. So I started writing these articles. I had a lot of rowing books already. So I stole stories from magazines and rewrote them a little. And after a while, I got approached by some readers, like, for example, Tim Koch, who is among us here today, if he might write one article. And he did. And he continued to write articles to this very day. The blog started in, let's see, March 12th, 2009. So next month, we are turning 14 years. And others came forward and asked questions and also wanted us to investigate this and that. And to this very day, I get several emails every week asking questions about if we, which now are more or less 10 regular writers of articles for the blog, Hear the Boat Sing, if we could help them to figure out who is this person that they have in their photo album and is holding an oar, or they have a pot at home, a rowing trophy that they know nothing about, but they would very much like to know more. So we have sort of become this, question blog too, where we try to figure out what people have in their homes when it comes to rowing material and other sort of rowing stuff. And in the meantime, we also try to write articles. As Rick said, and to this day, I checked this morning, today I posted the 4,392nd post since we started. And of course, numbers are maybe not that impressive. Like, for example, page views. Up to this morning, 3,004,265 people, or we have page views. So they have over 1 million people have looked at the site so far. And of course, in web language, 3 million is maybe not a lot, but I think it's pretty good for just being rowing history. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of all those people that have approached us, and also those who are now regular contributors writing. And last year, I checked, we had 30 different people writing articles for the site. So what have I tried to do with the website? Or I would say, what have we tried to do with the website? Because now I feel it's not just my site, it's all those people that regularly writes articles and posts for the sites. Well, there were two things that I wanted to accomplish. I wanted the website to be entertaining, but also educational, because I did understand that while a lot of people are rowing on the water, there isn't actually that many to compare to all those rowing that actually knows a lot about the history of rowing. And that was a thing that I wanted to accomplish. Of course, living in Mystic, working at Mystic Seaport, as I did, I very soon met Hart Perry and Tom Weil and Bill Miller, who has connections to the museum, because the National Rowing Foundation's collection of racing shells and rowing shells is still located at the museum, although sadly we had to move out all the memorabilia we had on display, among them the Rowing Hall of Fame, all that Tom and Bill can talk about and has more information than maybe I have. But to this day, I still get approached about articles, and they say, you know, what do I need to do to have an article published on Hear the Boat Sing? And I normally say, well, if you mention or rower at least once, it's a rowing article, and I will publish it. There is also those that approach me, sadly, and take up my time by offering money to publish their articles. And of course, that's publishing, PR companies who would like me to mention a racing boat, a yacht, or even garden sheds and things like that, that has nothing to do with Hear the Boat Sing or the sport that we love. So of course, although to my wife's dismay, I turned down the money that they would like to pay and refuse to publish their articles. What I wanted to do is to spread the word about rowing and this wonderful sport. And I understand that I now have thousands of readers around the world, as I get emails from them rather frequently, or they make comments after articles.
One thing, I'll just jump in here, but what's wonderful about Jorn's website is you can do research on that, as wonderfully organized in terms of past articles and getting to them. So, you know, it's a great tool, Jorn. Absolutely.
Yes. And here I would like to mention now, when Rick said that this year, the article that has had most readers so far is actually Rick's own article about Joe Burke's Pocock
Oh, wow. I didn't know
shell that you restored and wrote an article. So there you go. You're on the top list here for most readers this year, Rick.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks, Jorn. I think it's so important that that's one reason I wanted to have you on tonight, that everybody on this call can get the word out, if they are not aware of it, to utilize your site, to contribute to it, and is a beacon of ideas on how to save these things. We're going to switch gears here a little bit, and I'm going to bring on Al McKenzie from Seattle. And I've learned, as we do our research and so forth, and back to, you mentioned about the Pocock single for Joe Burke. I established a lot of contacts with the folks out in Seattle who love justifiably preserving the Pocock legend and the Pocock boats. And through the University of Washington and the Pocock, I guess for lack of a better word, foundation or whatever, they are doing some great things out there in terms of preserving this and actually establishing a somewhat brick and mortar museum, which is going to feature the boys in the boat and the actual boat that they rowed in 1936. So Al, if you're there, hope we can pull you in, if you can unmute yourself. And if you could talk a few minutes about what's going on out in Seattle, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, Jorn. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Jen, for the opportunity to let people know what's happening out in the Northwest. There are a number of players out here in the last probably 5-10 years that are involved in some of the historical aspects of, especially the Pocock legacy, which is significant in the Seattle area. And we don't have time to go through all those. So I sent Jen a list kind of with some website links that allow people, if they want to know more, to touch base with some of the things as far as rowing history at the UW, some of the video history that's out there. Also, UW Special Collections has a Pocock endowment for books, letters, literature, things of that nature. That's part of our collection process. And as far as books and written history, I don't know how many are aware. George Pocock's memoirs were written back in '87. And I don't know whether you see this. I don't have a slideshow. It's called Ready All. And that's his story written by Gordon Newell. Stan then came out with his memoirs following his dad's footsteps. And I don't know how much it's been in circulation. It's called Way Enough. And that was done in 2000. Just before Stan passed away, the family self-published George's actually handwritten memoirs. And so he gave that to me. And then I've added pictures I've collected, Pocock family over the last 30, 40 years. And that's one that I've self-published and kind of making it available to those that are interested. With Dan Brown's book coming out in, what was it, 2012, 2013, obviously that brought a lot of notoriety to 36 crew and training in Seattle out of the old shell house. And that raised a lot of interest then at the existing shell house, which is at the time kind of a canoe house, and seeing if there's something could be done to restore it and bring it back to a repurposed function. So online, Nicole Klein is here tonight, and she's the lead of this particular project, and I'm going to let her kind of tell you a little more about it. It's a chance physically to have a physical space to show some of the rowing memorabilia as far as shells, especially the Pocock shells in particular, but others as well. So Nicole, I'll let you come on board.
Thanks, Al. Hi, my name is Nicole Klein. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. So yes, I've been with the ASUW Shell House for about 5.5 years as the chief fundraiser for the project. As we all know, it's a means to the end. That's very important. The project's been raised in total a few times. Right now we're at 13.1 million towards our $18.5 million goal. And we just had a really great article. Thank you, Andy Anderson, in Rowing News magazine. So if you have it in your mailbox, it's in there. But it's really happening. So I know early on in my career with this project, I met with Bill Miller at Head of the Charles, and I was just flooded with all of these ideas and information, hearing about Mystic, and that there wasn't a central repository for rowing materials. So I have a museum background, so that really made me excited. But there's, I had to finish fundraising. So I just want to let you know that right now we're at this pivotal point where once we reach this internal benchmark of 15.5, that's our construction goal without the endowment, we will go into posting an RFQ to find our design build team. And because this building is a 1918 World War I Navy hangar on the National Register and a Seattle landmark, shoreline and archaeological site, it's got a lot of stakeholders and a lot of very varied layers of history and people that care about it, and not just rowers. So I think without the book Boys in the Boat, this building would just fall into disrepair and eventually have fallen down or burned down. But because of this book and this renewed interest in seeing and touching the history that this team demonstrated, not just for Seattle, it really is an international story. I sit in that building without heat at least once a week, not in the winter, and people just come by looking to come inside and see if this is where it was. And that's without the movie. Melanie Barstow has done over 7,000 tours herself as a student at the university and then as a graduate. And it's just never ending, this interest. So what I'm pitching to this group is that I can't promise you there's enough room in this 12,000 square foot hangar to put all of those trophies that you showed earlier, that there is the 10% that you see at any museum, right? But we do have the opportunity to go beyond the Seattle and Pacific Northwest story in the building. But there has to be a really concerted effort of decision making when we hire our design build team, so that when we approach them, we have an idea. And there is one space that I have in mind, which is above the locker rooms, sort of a mezzanine that would be kept up and away from the general hangar main space, which is where the events need to be. And as you all know, museums survive by renting out the space for events. The admissions are really not part of the major income that will come in. So that upper mezzanine has the possibility to contain, it's about 1,500 square feet long, but it's narrow. It could have a national presence. I also am looking towards digitizing as much as I can, because the hangar will never be museum level quality lighting and heat just because of its nature. So digitization and our archives at the university have been essential, so that it will become a place where people can search and find whatever they need to. The heart of the building will be the Pocock workshop. It's upstairs on the second floor, and it's just like you step back in time as it is right now. You smell the smells. There's still stains on the floor. It's pretty incredible. I've been calling it the heartbeat of the building, and we want to restore that back so that someone like Steve Chapin, I saw he was on the call, or other boat builders can activate the space and keep the craftsmanship alive through repairs and sharing with people the genius that he had. So please come to Seattle, check it out yourselves, but I'm asking this group, perhaps there could be a cohort put together to look into this before the time runs out, because we know what we can share with our resources at the University of Washington. We have a lot of history there already. Eric Cohen's on the call with our men's and women's teams. He has a great website by the decade, if you haven't checked it out, for Husky rowing history. But you know, we could have room for bigger if there was the niche there that this building could fill. And my last piece is, I'm not a rower. I learned to row in a single for this job so that you all would talk to me. And I read many, many books. But I do know that because of this book, it is a gift to the sport. And everyone's been kind of waiting to see what the movie will do. And I'm sitting there firsthand in this building, and I know that there is a really special role that this building will have for the sport of rowing. It's more of an entry-level community K through 12 interest, maybe the first touch they ever get with the sport, that is very different than if it was located at, you know, a national race course or someplace where the people that are attending it are experts already, you know. So it has a different feel in that approach, and there could be multiple museums across the country, but this one has a very broad-based appeal that I don't want this group not to overlook. So.
Well, Nicole, thank you. And what has impressed me in talking to Al and seeing pictures of what you're doing there is the cooperation, the working relationship you established with the university there, which gives it a great deal of not credibility, but interaction, that you can have an institution which is involved in it and helping you guys out. And the fundraising you just mentioned is just amazing, which shows that under the right circumstances, and perhaps it is possible to have a museum, maybe that's not the right word, but a center. And the Pocock legend is a great entree into that. And then of course the Boys in the Boat doubles that entree. But we like to think too, back east, we also have some good entrees. We just got to learn to exploit them a little bit, you know, so people understand, you know, get that interest in to help get these things done. So thank you so much, folks in Seattle. I think it's been instructive to us, and we'll talk more about that later here. But I'm going to bring on two gentlemen now. One is Tom Weil, Yale oarsman. Tom is, along with Bill Miller, longtime historians and archivists for Boathouse Row, but more in general for rowing in general. Tom has amassed, and I'm anxious to see it. I keep saying I'm going to stop by his home, has a huge collection of rowing memorabilia that he is working to save. Real quick story, I had to, Bill Miller sent me a trophy one day and he was asking about it. And I called Tom Weil and I said, geez, do you know who won the single in 1913 Henley? And Tom said, well, wait a minute. And he reaches up and 30 seconds later, he has the answer for me. Well, boy, that amazed me. And Tom was involved not only in Mystic, but also in the establishment, I think it's from on the board of directors of the Rowing Museum in Henley, England. And he can talk a little bit about that, I hope, and the genesis of that and how that has been working out as ideas we have. And then we'll bring Bill Miller on to also, who's from the NRF, who has established and maintained a wonderful rowing website called rowinghistory.net, which is a wealth of information. But let's first bring Tom on board if we can. If Tom, you're available, if you can unmute, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Terrific, Rick. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And thanks for the effort to bring us all together. I'm going to do two quick questions up front. Number one, there are two canaries. I see at least two canaries in the coal mine. One is anybody on this call under 50? And there is at least one person under 50, but I think there's a genuine concern among rowing historians and collectors that we don't see many young people getting into the business. And if it's true that there are no young people interested, that casts a whole different light on what we're trying to do. So hopefully I'm wrong, but if I'm not, I would hope that one of our opportunities can be to preach the gospel as widely as possible in our clubs, in our colleges, and so on, and try to stimulate interest among the people who need to follow us and pick up the legacy. I'm going to talk a little bit about another canary in the coal mine, which is the Henley River and Rowing Museum. And it's the only museum of its size in the world that covers rowing as much as it does. And its origin story is telling. Chris Dodd, a great English rowing reporter and writer, was at the 1984 Rowing Olympics exhibition in Santa Barbara in conjunction with the Los Angeles Olympics. And he saw an exhibition of tremendous amount of stuff. And he came back and said, we need a place like that in the UK. And he got some people together and they went at it for a while and nothing happened until a guy with deep pockets showed up. His story was he was a very prosperous businessman in Henley, had a big estate, and his wife had found a Stone Age axe head on the estate. And his wife had said, we need a place to show this. So this guy who had no interest in rowing put up the money for the Henley River and Rowing Museum. And he built the building. He gave a nice endowment, and things went along relatively swimmingly for several years until he got tired of funding the difference between the costs of the museum and the combination of the endowment proceeds and footfall ticket prices, which really don't do much. And he said, if anything is to be worthwhile preserving, it needs to pay for itself. Well, anyone familiar with museums, orchestras, opera, anything like that on this call understands that's a no-go. There have to be patrons. And I think one of the great sadnesses behind the lack of more interest in establishing, whether it's to be a central national rowing museum or satellites that celebrate rowing history, is that there is relatively little funding interest in the American rowing community. And there's a lot of well-to-do people in the community, but the main draw seems to be supporting operating clubs. And that's understandable. But can't there be enough to also support the history and the legacy? And today, the River and Rowing Museum, and I'm probably speaking a little bit out of turn. They're struggling a bit, and they are in the mecca of rowing in Henley. And if you can't get a bunch of Brits to support this, I mean, my poster Brit hero is Tim Koch, who is here on the call at 1:30 or 2:30 in the morning, his time from London. But where do you find that support? Because there's no question the support has to be there. And people on this call, people like Bill Miller, Goran, and so on, Rick, who uncompensated, put incredible time into doing this. Years ago, I worked a little bit with Jerry Henwood in trying to get a museum up in Fairmount Park. And, there have been a lot of efforts that have gone nowhere. So the bottom line is there has to be a source of funding for this stuff for something to take form. I'm going to add to that and conclude with, and be happy to take questions. I'm going to deputize without authority Rick to be the recipient of emails from everybody on this call who has any interest in working on being part of a rowing history working group, thinking about what do we try to do, and let's sort out what you're going to do. Should there be a national museum? What is its scope? What is the scope of rowing it should talk about? Should we care about triremes? Should we care about Burmese foot rowers? Are we interested in watermen in commercial rowing or just amateur rowing? What is the geographic scope of our interest? Would an American museum want to collect Olympic stuff from countries around the world? There are so many issues that need to be sorted out, and the Henley River and Rowing Museum has addressed a lot of these because they had to after the great idea of let's get a museum formed. What are we collecting? And at one extreme, some people said we should only be collecting stuff from the Thames watershed. Someone else said it ought to be the UK. Someone else, Chris Dodd and I, said it should be the world. So a lot of informed thinking needs to going on and decision-making going on as to what form the preservation of rowing history can take, and then come up with a budget for the form that's being talked about. And I'm a big fan of don't have a big exhibition space, go with the digitalization, have an online presence, but that costs money too. So come up with a budget and then go talking to people with money and say, is this something you think you can support? And that's my little bit of preaching for this evening.
Well, Tom, thank you. And I think you hit on some great points there. And I appreciate the designation of me as a recipient, and I'm happy to do that. But I think you hit on the real central points of the challenge we have in defining this and getting a proposal together and then try and shake the money tree in a way. But I want to bring Bill Miller on now, who is a member of the National Rowing Foundation. And Bill, as I mentioned before, and if you haven't ever visited, he has his rowing website called rowinghistory.net. And I know, Tom, you've contributed heavily to that with articles, and it has all sorts of wonderful information about the history of rowing. But Bill has the experience from the NRF standpoint, the Mystics standpoint, and can maybe comment about where the collection now stands that was at Mystic. So, Bill, if you're available and you can unmute yourself, let's get to you.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
One of those
I wasn't sure exactly what angle you wanted me to participate in, but certainly the NRF is a good place. And just one other thing is the rowinghistory.net is very much a static site. And I just didn't have the patience to try to roll it into some sort of an active blog type of thing. And when Goran stepped forward with his blog, I thought that was the greatest thing, and it's a lot of work. But I wanted to make the rowinghistory.net site more or less a depository of information. There are lists up there, a list of all the patents that I could find from the US Patent Office. There's lists of all the US national team people that have ever rowed and worn a US team jersey. And I just put up a few months ago all of the National Rowing Hall of Fame people. So it's just a place where you can go and take a look at things. And there are a few articles, but it's primarily just a resource of items. And actually, I also just put up there, and Rick, you announced it, is George Pocock's letters. I should say Joe Burke's letters to George Pocock, about 17 of them. And I have the originals here. And as a matter of fact, I think that these things should go to Seattle. So Al, some point we need to chat and find out what the best location is, who's going to basically take care of these letters, the originals. They shouldn't be sitting here in my home. They should be somewhere that they could be cherished and a resource somewhere else. But if you wanted to read them, you can go to the website. Okay, the National Rowing Foundation. I think, let me start from the beginning. In 1992, a group of us formed what we called the Friends of Rowing History. We actually initially called it a Committee for Rowing History. And what Tom was talking about, we thought we'd really organize something and get something rolling. And Tom and I were part of the originators, as well as Tom Mendenhall and Hart Perry. So obviously through the ranks, it's thinned out a lot, and it's just kind of in limbo. But we had meetings, and then that led to Hart Perry when he moved to North Stonington to volunteer at Mystic Seaport, and he was very good at wiggling into things. And basically, the building that used to be the library became vacant. So he stepped up and said, "Can we use it?" And they said yes. So we set that up. It wasn't only about 800 square feet, 900 square feet or so, but there were 15 cabinets with 3 shelves on each cabinet, and we had it chock full of things, medals and trophies and all kinds of artifacts. And so that was around, when did we start that? Around 2002 or so, 2004, I think that maybe we set that up. But in 2014, they decided to demolish the building. So they were going to put in a brand new entrance and use that land for a big pavilion. So we had to pack everything up. And Hart had basically taken on a number of rowing shells, probably over a dozen rowing shells, mostly Pocock shells. He wanted to have one Pocock for each category: a pair with, pair without, 4 with, 4 without, 8, double, quad, single. And so they are still in the Rossi Mill, which is a storage area for boats. And the seaport has hundreds of boats in storage, along with our dozen rowing shells and a number of rowing shells that were donated to Mystic Seaport directly. So that stuff's there, along with some rowing machines, Narragansetts, and some 1870s hydraulic rowing machines, a port and a starboard one. And but the items that were on display, medals and photographs and images, trophies, they were all boxed up, and we got free storage from Gentle Giant Gentle Giant Moving, and their storage building. And the owner is a rower and a friend. So he said, "Yep, fine, we'll store it as long as you want." So that's been in storage since 2014. Much too long. We haven't found a place to set up that stuff, but it exists. It's ready to go whenever we find a place or places. And that will get me along to some of the things I've been really hunting around and talking to people, Nicole and others, and sites. And we basically, Tom and I made a few trips down to the Princeton National Rowing Center, Rowing Association on Mercer Lake. They were going to put on a huge addition, and they were going to dedicate some major space for the National Rowing Hall of Fame and Rowing History Museum, kind of a combination thing. Their fundraising didn't meet their goals, so we were the first ones to get cut. So it's back looking around again, and I've been in contact with Sarasota. There's a lot happening down there, very, very active, and they're putting in a huge, huge new boathouse. Actually, it's not a boathouse, it's going to be a community center. I don't know how many thousands of square feet. They have a new executive director, so all my communications with the old one I'm going to have to start over again with them. But the chairman of the board is very excited about seeing what we can put together. And I know that Nicole, the space out there, we can do something out there, other spaces as well. Mystic wants to do something again, great. We want to be able to participate there. So whatever spaces pop up, I know that Marist College was really interested in doing something. They don't have any physical plant that we can use, so it was more or less down the road, maybe we can do something. So anyways, there's a number of irons in the fire. None of them are burning hot. Sarasota might be the one that's doing an awful lot, but I'm going back down there to meet with them at the end of the month, at the beginning of April. I'll have a better feed of an idea of what's a better feeling of what they're going to be doing. So we'll see what happens there, but you know, we're in limbo. We're hunting and looking, and if anybody has any suggestions, I think that one thing that we want to be able to, we need traffic. We need people coming and going, rowing people. They need to see, as Tom said, we need to get new people excited. So I know that we sent down to Sarasota for display Con Finley's Coxed Pair that won the Nationals in '63 and the Olympic trials in '64. We sent it down on a high school trailer out of Connecticut. And when they got down there, they took it off the trailer, unwrapped it, and all the high school kids were like, wow, look at that, a wooden boat, that's cool. That's the type of stuff we want to do. We want to get them, plant those seeds with those people, as well as the general public. So we really want to see if we can hit that nail on the head and get those people excited and show them what it is. And there's so much stuff out there. I mean, Tom's got literally thousands of items. I've got a couple of thousand items, and I'm sure all you people have items that are put away. And there's so many things, and the picture of all the trophies. There's just so much material that could be on display, can be on display in multiple locations. And we'll see what develops. We want to do something. We want to do a lot of things. So just stand by and let's see what we can put together.
Well, thanks, Bill. That's great. And I like your last point, but it was interesting getting young people involved. But when I was working on Joe Burke's single, restoring that at Malta Boat Club, because it was in the boat bay, that's the only place I could do it. And one of the programs that rose out of Malta is the Marian Mercy rowing program, young ladies. And as I worked on that during the day, they would come over and kind of look at it and say, what is this? And I said, well, it's a wood boat, George Pocock from 1938, rowed by Joe Burke. And they look and say, well, who's Joe Burke? And I say, well, tell you what, ladies, go back to your internet tonight, look it up, and come back and we'll talk tomorrow. And they were just amazed that this was an artifact of that age being restored, but the significance of Joe Burke as an oarsman. So thanks, great points. I think we want to circle back now, given the hour, and allow other people to speak and to chime in. Jim Dietz, I know you're on the horn tonight. I'd love to hear some of your comments. But my final thought is to what Bill just said. If we can hold off, don't throw anything out until you're sure that we should throw it out. Because we've got to try and come up with some methodology for locating where these things are. I just got a box today. I think Joan Scholl's on the call. She sent me from California of things she has. So Jim, if you want to unmute, maybe you could give us a couple of your perspectives. I think everybody knows Jim Dietz without introduction.
I'm unmuted, Rick, and I think this has been a fascinating night. I could listen to Tom and Bill and Gordon and these other people forever. I mean, as we've talked about many times in the past, we just don't want to get this stuff lost or even worse, thrown away, and to try to compile it someplace, as Tom was saying, even digitally would be fantastic. There are treasures all around the country. I know Tom was at the New York Athletic Club one night with Tom Quinn going through some of the old New York AC things that are treasures dating back to the early 1800s and stuff. And just to know where these things are and their history. I mean, there are boats that are hidden in the Philadelphia museums. There are historic boats hanging from the ceilings in bars in New York that people don't even know that are up there anymore. It would be nice to recover some of these. I'd worked with Hart in the past, and I got Hart the 1871 6-oared shell that the University of Massachusetts raced against Harvard and Brown in 1871, and that opened me up to exploring Rowan history and constantly looking for boats and more stuff. And I have to agree with Tom. We have to get more young people involved because we're not spring chickens anymore.
You're absolutely right, unfortunately. And there's a whole there's a whole generation right now of people of our age who
Mhm.
came from a common background, who are very much interested in this, but we got to somehow create that next generation involved, because that's the only way it's going to work. So other folks on the call, please, let's chime in now. If you want some comments, we've seen some things, and Jen, we've seen some things posted on the chat room. Please, let's hear from some other folks while we have a few minutes here. Anybody else?
Hey, Rick,
Yes.
Al here. Is Maggie Coffey on this Zoom session?
I think she was signed up. I don't know if she's on.
I think she's on.
Here we are. Here we are. We're here.
Okay, there's Calvin.
Hi, guys. Yeah,
Maggie's got an opportunity.
yeah. The video keeps freezing. We're in the outback in upstate New York, so sorry about that. But I just wanted to. I know Bill's aware of this already, and Al certainly is aware of it. Can you hear me all right here?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you well.
The video's crazy. I'm going to turn it off. Anyway, we live in upstate New York, and a town just right near us is called Hammondsport, and maybe some of you have heard of it, but it's in the Finger Lakes district. And anyway, Calvin, as you may remember, made a lot of boats a while ago, and we have a lot of them we live on a farm, and out in the farm are all these old boats. Well, a nice lady came by called Nancy Whiteman, who happens to be involved with the Finger Lakes Boating Museum. And she said, do you guys make boats? Because we display them. So long story short, Nancy and Ed are both on this webinar with us, and they're very active in the Finger Lakes Boating Museum. And they have an enormous facility there that used to be the Taylor Winery. It's a beautiful facility. If you click on Finger Lakes Boating Museum, you'll see what I'm talking about. But their emphasis is on boats made in the area, and they put them on display. They renovate them. They have parts of the museum where you can watch people build boats. They even asked Calvin to be a museum display, and he was kind of interested. But since we got involved with them, they've set up a whole part of the museum just for rowing, and they're very enthusiastic about expanding people's exposure to rowing in our area. And you might say, well, we're in the middle of nowhere, who's going to go up to the Finger Lakes? Well, in upstate New York, the biggest tourist attraction, as you probably all know, is Niagara Falls. The second biggest tourist attraction is the Corning Museum of Glass. That's 20 miles from where the Finger Lakes Boating Museum is. And where we live in Watkins Glen has turned into a tourist mecca in the summer, and people are going on wine tours and brewery tours, and they're always looking for things to do. But I'm going to stop talking and let Nancy and Ed talk a bit, but they have generously agreed and volunteered to work with our group here. If you're looking to store boats, or if you're looking to put boats on display, trust me, they have a lot of space up there in this old Taylor Winery. And I'm gonna unmute Nancy. You go ahead with Ed and just tell them a little bit about the museum. But it's another opportunity for us that I think you should hear about.
Thanks, Maggie. This is Nancy. Ed's here with me. He told me I'm supposed to take the lead, so I guess I'm the mouth tonight. We have been gifted 14 acres and 20 buildings of an old winery. We are currently using 5 of those buildings. Now, granted, every building has to be rehabbed because they were out of use for many, many years. But we believe in eating an elephant one bite at a time. So we are taking our time and we are rehabbing these buildings one step at a time, one building at a time. We are, our mission is boats built and significantly used in the Finger Lakes. Well, that may not sound like much with the kind of scope that you're talking about, but Calvin and Maggie Coffey are builders of shells, as far as we're concerned. And we have universities all around us, speaking of younger people, that have that have crews. Syracuse University is an hour from here. Ithaca, which has Cornell and Ithaca College, is an hour from here. And there are others that I don't know specifically. And one of the things that we are attempting to do as a museum is to be significantly represented in each of the Finger Lakes communities. Now, there are 11 lakes, and there are communities all around, top and bottom and around those lakes. So we've been in Hammondsport only 8 years, but we are working to expand our reach into those communities significantly. We see the rowing community as an opportunity to not only help you, but to also meet our goals. So we're open to lots of additional conversations. I've had a nice conversation with Bill Miller a year or so ago, and Maggie and Cal and I keep in touch all the time. So we're happy to help how we can. Any questions, please? Our email is, or our website is fingerlakesboatingmuseum.org. Ed wants to say something.
Yeah, just in terms of our physical complex, the buildings we have been in non-use for quite a while, so it's it's a challenge to bring them back online, but that's what we do, and we have good funding to do that. For example, last June we opened up 5,000 square feet exclusively for a rowboat exhibit. June of this year, we'll open up 6,000 square feet exclusively for launches and runabouts and a few sailboats. And that's just 2 of the remaining dozen buildings on the campus that we will be picking away at, building by building, to expand our mission.
One thing I'll mention, because you also are in the pocket of a very strong heritage of a company from Troy, the paper boat company, the Waters Company. And
Yes.
I think
Yes.
you have one of their boats, maybe the only one remaining one, which was a huge part of rowing history, particularly in the 1860s and 70s and 80s. And if it wasn't for, if they had fiberglass in those days, wooden boats would have disappeared 120 years ago.
Of course. That particular boat is at the Glenn Curtis Museum right now.
Okay.
But it's going to come to our museum as soon as I get my act together and go fetch it. So
Well, that's a wonderful,
it'll be at the boating museum soon.
that's a wonderful story. Well, I think that this is a great opportunity. I think we need to put this in the mix and make it something we do, because to find a repository for all these boats, as Jim talked about, is important, before. And I've been to the Mystic warehouse, for lack of a better word, when I picked up a boat for Vesper a couple of years ago, and I walked through that warehouse, and it was just like the last scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. You walk into this warehouse and it's just filled with boats, and there was a whole section of Pococks sitting there, and there was this one Donaratico boat that I brought, the bow section, but it just underlined to me that I don't know if these boats will ever see the light of day again unless we do something, along with the other memorabilia that Bill Miller talked about. So great. Other comments, please? Jump in. I think we got a couple of minutes here, Jen, before we have to.
I think my comment was germane.
Nicole here. I just had a quick comment as coming in from an outsider over the last 5 years, but having a museum hat on. I think, there is an Association of American Museums to get credentialized, which is a big deal. And once you're part of it, it comes with certain benefits and sharing of information and training. But what about using, US Rowing, the NRF, to build, a case for support about why this matters? And this might have already happened with Mystic, to re-pull those out, to refresh them and say, okay, this matters to us, because yes, money is the key to all of this. But we have to know exactly what we're asking for. And for people like Nancy and Ed that have done all this work in their small space, those should all count. They should all be able to be added up and rolled up together, because you're going to learn about rowing in so many different locations, and there's going to be artifacts all over the place. We can't imagine just having one place. I think that one central place is great, like Cooperstown, like we always reference, but I think what's more realistic is to know that there are many places, but that we all need to be united under one umbrella so that we all can share searchable assets, kind of like a library system within each other. And we could come up with our own kind of American Association of Museums, American Association of Rowing Museums or archives or whatever, so that we can manage that, and we can kind of endorse each other and keep pointing to each other. And you could take a whole US tour and stop and see all these places. But I still think there's the need for one central, but I think we're all doing little pieces of it that should be counted in some way, and that shouldn't be such a hunt. Or if they live digitally like Marist, which is doing a great job, still be counted. So that was my 2 cents.
That's great, because, you know, we would think of in terms of Philadelphia and Boathouse Row that, you know, of the 10 boathouses here, each one in itself is a mini museum. And through Dottie's book and so forth, we're, you know, there's several of us try to do tours when possible, but and get the clubs to preserve their collections, but each one is a mini museum, but not everybody knows that and who to contact to go see it. And I know you have tours out there in Seattle of your facility underway. So good point. Anything else?
Hi, it's Tim Koch from London.
Hey, Tim, great.
Hey, it's a bit late or early here, but anyway, just a couple of brief things. The River and Rye Museum at Henley is in a slightly precarious state, but one piece of good news is, well, they've been through quite a few directors in the last few years, and the trustees presumably haven't given the directors a lot of time to turn the place around, but they've just employed a new director who is actually a rower for the first time since Paul Mains at the beginning. Steve O'Connor is a former captain of London Rowing Club, and more importantly, he left a job in the city to set up Fulham Reach Boat Club, which is a charity to get state school kids rowing, what you call public school kids in the States. Very able guy. He's been my boss for the last 5 years. So that's quite encouraging, although even though he's a rower, he's got to turn the museum around. So I suspect he won't be able to concentrate on the rowing aspect quite as much, because it's the least commercial part of the museum, but could be worse. And just another brief thing. Some of you will already be aware of the online archive of Thames Rowing Club. If you're not, please have a look at it. It really is the gold standard for certainly a club putting its archive online. I mean, Thames has a remarkable archive. It's an old and reasonably wealthy club, but their archivist James Elder, who was a high-ranking civil servant, he went out and got himself a degree in archiving, or an archivist degree, and he's I don't think he's got a huge budget, but he's digitized all the minute books, which are online. They have a remarkable collection of photographs, which are all online. And also physically in the clubhouse, they've rebuilt the clubhouse and done a remarkable job of making it a working rowing club, and they've preserved their archive as well. And they've digitized all their pictures on the walls. So if the place burnt down, they'd still have all their information. So I think James is quite generous with information. He doesn't want to get sucked into committees or anything like that. But if you want to ask about digitizing a rowing archive, he's the man. And he's even relatively young. He's possibly under 40.
Well, thank you, Tim. That's great. Now, I've noticed in the chat room here, some other folks have chimed in with some other websites, which I was aware of, just kind of running out of time. But, you know, Lenny O'Donnell out there in Seattle has a wonderful website of just rowing movies. So if you have rowing movies you want to save, Lenny has been saving those, and not many people are aware that that exists. And I think one of our tasks is going to be to maybe summarize all these websites and what we heard tonight, and get them out to the folks, is part of our goal here. But there's a lot of goals here to do.
Yeah, there's also a YouTube channel on with old rowing films on as well. Moston ARC, it's called. That's worth a look.
Okay.
Both Tom and John have their hands up. I don't know if they wanted to add anything before we wrap.
Okay, go ahead.
That's very, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, just very quickly. If anyone wants a great project, I mean, one of the things that historians have to worry about to some extent is catching history while it's around us. And, the 36 crew was a great crew, but the last collegiate crew, which has its own great story that won gold at the Olympics, was the Yale 56 crew. And S.E. Esselstyn was actually on this call at the beginning. I don't know if he still is, but he's around, and Tommy Charlton, the bow, is around, and Bill Beckleen, the Cox, who is known to a lot of people, are around. And I'm just going to say, for anyone who wants to get into what could be a terrific project, a terrific book possibility, catch these guys while you can catch them.
Okay. And who else had his hand up? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is John Bolser. I'm here at the University of Washington Libraries. I wanted to echo what Nicole mentioned earlier, the idea of sort of a dispersed way of organizing or seeking out and housing materials. The model that comes to my mind is the Center for History of Physics at the American Institute of Physics, where they do have some archival collections there, but their primary focus is on connecting collections with institutions that can capably manage them. So if a prominent physicist were to retire, they would make sure that the person's papers got placed in a research repository that could then make those available. So looking at it as sort of a central model of like a clearinghouse or a way to connect collections with repositories that can cope with them. And then they also create a central research database so that scholars can figure out, okay, who's got whose papers, where did the history of this institution end up, that sort of thing. So if we look at a collective that are on a call like this, the odds of us all being able to sort of get all of our objects into one building are pretty close to zero. But the odds of us sort of pooling our resources in a information context, a wayfinding, a connecting historians and people with the historical materials or the information content is a role that a group like this I could see being able to play. So if we think about that sort of how do we be the facilitators of connecting people with these collections to places that can actually for the long term preserve them, make them available. It's a role I can see us playing.
I think you hit it right on the nail head. A great summary there, because that probably is, and we will talk more about this, but that's probably the most feasible thing to do, and to preserve these things and get them out there so people can see them. And I've tried to start a fledgling library down at my home club, and I just collect everything I can, and it's available to people to come in and look at it. But that's just one club, and not everybody knows, and not everybody knows what's there. And so you're right. And we got to find a vehicle to do that and get a proposal together and make that happen. I think that's the consensus, what I'm hearing tonight. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
No, Rick, and I think, John, you were kind of wrapped it up nicely as to how I was going to wrap it. And I think that, there's enough excitement here that, the HOSR would be happy to kind of just kind of guide this effort along and maybe even just kind of host meetings, maybe if it's twice a year or more as we get started, just to kind of organize around this effort. And then it can kind of take off on its own. But I think that the collectively archiving and linking these local repositories is the way to go right now. And also this group could provide resources to local clubs, as Rick said, that, they're just trying to operate their club, right? And, it's following history and archiving falls by the, okay, if we have enough time to do that. And if we gave them maybe, you know, a template or an outline of, hey, this is what you do when you have something like this. This is what you do when you, this is how you archive materials. This is area people that are local to you that have repositories that you can link up with, but giving them resources where they're not having to create the wheel all over again, I think would be another great use of a group like this. And then also coming up with some type of succession plan. You know, how do we institutionalize this? And, you know, is this, you know, is the National Rowing Federation or US Rowing, you know, could they be the, you know, the leaders of this, and then this working group, you know, kind of steers that along. But these are all really great questions, and I think from here this evening, what I'd like to do, and we can open up a thread with emails. So I usually send a wrap email for all the participants that came tonight. And then what I'd like to say is, since Rick is going to be the keeper of emails, but what I'd like to do is get, you know, I'll ask, hey, if you would like to be included in this effort going forward, maybe it's jumping on a call in another month and kind of seeing, you know, what the next steps are. Just let us know, and, you know, we'll make sure everybody's included and moving it forward. Because I think there's so much good knowledge here, and I do believe that you know, just getting these stories out there and preserving them in the proper fashion, and getting some young people involved in this is key to moving forward. As far as our HOSR story hours go, we are kind of dedicating this year to kind of delving into our little mini museums along Boathouse Row, because we want to get this, you know, recorded. So we'll be having story hours throughout the year, kind of focused on the events that created and established Boathouse Row as kind of a rowing mecca in the country, and kind of the events that challenged it through the years and almost saved it several times. So please join us for those future story hours. And Rick and I will kind of spearhead getting this organized group together to move this idea of this collective effort across the country and around the world to formalize in a better way. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for your time, Rick, Dotty, Goran, Al, Tom, Bill, Nicole, Jim. Everybody had such great things to add tonight, and I know we could talk about this for hours. And you know, we really appreciate each one of you being here this evening and all of your individual efforts, because we know you're all doing good stuff to preserve this history. We will be in touch. We hope you all have a good evening. And if you have any questions, again, I'll send an email so you have our contact information, and we'll reconnect another evening. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you, Scooty.
Hey, Gardner, how are you?
Hey, Gardner.
Hello, everybody. Good night. That was great.
Good job, Rick.
Hi, John, thank you. Good.
And congratulations on your promotion.
Oh. Well, we can talk about that. Yeah.
No good deed goes unpunished.
I guess not.
Hey, well done, Rick. Really well
thanks,
done.
Alan. I think we're all pleased to get involved in this, and I think we got a great group. It's been in the story hours, you know, and we all know each other on Boathouse Rows. I think that's a great start, but we got involved the rest of the country in what we heard tonight. So, you know, we'll work on it. Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. It was a great job putting this all together. Really appreciate it.
Well done again. Good night.
All right.
Good night, everybody.